Hello friends, welcome back to Aunt Debbie's Boutique. Today we are going to make a chandelier quilt out of Paisley fabrics. And I have chosen to use fat quarters. And this particular set was Paisley prints by Benatrax. I don't know that I can pronounce that right. Studio. And I chose all the pretty purples, pinks, and reds and left the browns and greens behind because there was 12 fat quarters, and I just needed 7. So there was a time I would have never put reds, purples, and pinks together, but those times are past. And so I chose this particular group to use. Now, you can either use 7 fat quarters or 2 charm packs, or you could use 1 layer cake pack, but you'd have quite a bit of waste on that. And so it'd make good scraps for scrappy quilts, what was left over. But you could use a layer cake if you had one, or you can just use scraps or yardage. So I chose the fat quarter route, and you need 7 of them. And out of each one, you're going to cut 6 5-inch squares. So that's what I have those. Then, so if you had a charm pack, they'd already be picked for you. Then you want coordinating 2.5-inch squares, and you need twice as many. So we'll need 12 of each one of these. And we're going to use 2 2.5-inch squares with every 5-inch square to make our blocks. Now, I don't see any reason why these really have to match. That's the way the pattern said to, and that's what I'm going to do, but I think it would be just as cute using a variety of prints. Then you're going to need 4 yards of a background print. I chose this cream colored, and you're going to cut out 16, 13, and 3, we're going to cut out 8 13 and 3/8 quarters squares, and then cut them in half to form our triangles. And these are going to be our side triangles. Then you're going to need 2 6 and 7/8 squares to produce 4 corner triangles. This is 16 side triangles, and this is 4 corner triangles, and you need half as many squares to get that. Then we're going to need 82 2.5-inch by 5-inch strips, and that comes out of 17 strips of 2.5 by width of fabric. Now, I was able to get 6 per strip. The pattern calls for 5 per strip, and I guess that's to be cautious because some fabrics are a little bit narrower than others, so you can get by with 15 strips, not 17, to cut those. And then for these strips, they are 2.5 by 7 inches, and you also need 82 of them, and it takes 11 strips by the width of fabric, 2.5 by the width of fabric. So those are our pieces. Now, this is a very simple quilt, and I think it's going to go pretty fast putting it together. The one thing that's different about this quilt than any that I have done a demonstration on is that these blocks are set on point. And if you don't know what on point is, we will get to that later in the video. But there's nothing hard about it. It looks much harder than it is. It's no different than just doing a standard block. So just stick with me, and I'll show you how to do that. The first step that we're going to do, and again, I like to chain everything, so I'm going to move a little this, I think I'll move it all over here to the side till we need it. We're going to take our 7.5 by 2.5 inch strips. Got fuzz on that, that's not a spot. And then we're going to take our 2.5 inch squares, and we're going to put them on the end and just sew a 1/4 inch square on every one of them. So this is going to go real fast. So join me at the sewing machine while I do that. Now that I've got all the pieces sewn, I'm going to cut them apart, and I just recently purchased this. It's called Change Piece Thread Cutting Gizmo. That's a good name for it. And I got it from the Fat Quarter Shop, and I will link it below. We'll see how it works. Pretty good. That worked really well. I would definitely recommend it. It certainly saved time. Okay, the next thing we need to do is iron all of these with the seam towards the dark fabric. So the best way to do that, and my iron's not completely hot, but is to set your seam like that and then flip it open. If you have this little block on top, it will go a whole lot faster. Now that we have all of these sewn and ironed, And by the way, it took me 22 minutes to sew all those. So if every seam goes that fast, you can easily make this in a day. So I'm gonna set these aside. And our next step is going to use our 5-inch strips and our 5-inch squares. And we are going to sew, let me just lay one here, one on each side like this to every block. And after that, we will come back with the coordinating fabric, not the one I'm laying here, and we will sew these on each side. So I'm going to chain these. There's 41 of them, I believe. I'll sew all of them down this one side, and then I'll come back and sew all of them down the other side. So I switched over to my 1/4 inch foot. It's a foot with this little flange or ledge here on the side. And the fabric then will ride right up next to it and make your seams a perfect 1/4 inch. Now, sometimes I feel like it makes the seam just a hair too big, and I like to use a scant 1/4 inch seam, but with this block, it's really not going to matter. As long as they're all this size, it should be fine. I'm also starting off with a leader, so I get a running start and don't have any missed stitches or anything like that at the beginning. Okay, now that I'm at these last two, I'll go over. I'm setting my seams on both of them. And then I'm ironing towards the dark fabric on both sides. I'm flipping it over and ironing it again. Now, ordinarily I'd be steaming it, but my iron ran out of water right when I got started, and I didn't want to stop and go fill it up. So I'll do that in a little bit, because they'll still get steamed quite a few times before we're done. Okay, now I want to separate these by color because we also need to separate these by color. So that, and these are the same, even though some of it's blue and some of it's red. That's just the way that Paisley print was. That was my favorite print out of the bunch. You can see it's gray, red, and blues in different places. Okay. Now for all the pink ones. These are a little bit mixed up, so we'll just kind of sort as we go. Now this looks similar to this one, but this one is more of a brownish red, and that one's more of a red, cherry red. So they are different. And we've also got, this one is pinkish purple, while this one is a more of a lavender purple. Okay, now that we have them separated by groups, I'm going to stack them over here every other way, and then we'll start with this group. And what we're going to do on this, as you've probably figured out, is we're going to put these longer strips on here with the same fabric in opposite corners. Now this is where I said I don't think it matters whether it's the same color or if you wanted to make it more scrappy looking, and because when it's all said and done, there's going to be lots of different colors on this quilt. So I don't know that that matters, but this is the way the patterns usually tell you to do it. So this is how I'm going to do it. Now, I will link a free pattern below. I found one. Well, I found quite a few, but there was one in particular that was the way I like to do it. And so I always try to either give you a link to a free pattern or make my own pattern or template and give you a way to get to that. Or if it's a pattern I purchased, I'll give you a link on where you can purchase it. So I'm going to take one set at a time over to the machine, and I will first sew down one side on all of these, then I'll turn around and go down the other side. So let's do one group of these here so you can see what I'm talking about. Now when I go to sew these, I want to make sure that my seams are nested, and since we ironed to the dark side both times, that should happen. And you can just feel it right there where these seams are going this way, these are going this way and they just kind of lock in place. Now, when I get to this other seam at the bottom of every one, I'm making sure that it's folded towards the dark fabric too, because we will need it to be folded that way when we go down the other side. Now let's go down this side, and it's going to be the same procedure. And just like that, we have 6 blocks done. Now, I like that this little thread cutter has 2 places to cut it. So when I've got 2 seams like that, I can place it one in each. Sometimes they get bunched up and I put them both in the same one, but this sure makes it go faster. Okay. Here are our blocks. We're going to iron this towards the center. And I don't think my iron's hot. Yeah, it's a little bit hot. I did add a little water to it, but I forgot to turn it back on. So let's iron these real quick, and then I'll show you a few things about how it goes together. There, it's getting hot. And I want to check my points, my corners. They look okay. I've got some of these that look like my cream colored pieces were a little bit long. I'll measure them before I put the quilt together. And yes, I should have set my seams on those others, and I didn't. Okay. Now let's talk about what it means to set a quilt on point. Normally, let me just move this so we have a little more viewing space here. Normally you would sew your quilt blocks in rows like this. But to put a quilt on point, we're going to turn it so it's more like a diamond shape. And the points here will touch. And then these will be set like that. Here's one like this. Of course, we're going to mix up all the colors. But then, well, I don't have enough of them made. Let me... When we get to our edges, we're going to need, we don't want our edge to look like this. So that's where these triangles come in. We set them all the way around the edge. And then the smaller ones are going to go on our corners. So that's what it means to be on point. It's to set your block diagonally, and you can get some real interesting patterns that way, and it's not any harder to sew together. I will show you that when we get all the blocks done. I think it'd be too confusing at this point, but we'll have 41 blocks that we're going to set on point. We'll fill around the edges with triangles and on the corners with triangles, and I'll show you how to put it together. But first, let me finish sewing the rest of these blocks, and then we will meet over at my dining room table again and lay out our quilt. All right, here is our quilt blocks all laid out. They say necessity is the mother of invention, so I put a piece of plywood here on my dining room table to kind of extend it so I could lay out a little wider, and you could see where all the triangles were at around the edges. If you'll see, the big triangles are sitting in there all the way around all the edges. And now to put it together. We're not going to put it together like you might think. We're not going to go just straight across. What we're going to do, let me see if I can point without getting in the picture because I'm not presentable, but we're going to sew in lines like this, diagonal lines. And once we get 2 diagonal lines done, we can sew those 2 together. So we're going to go from corner down to this corner, and I'll let you watch me as I proceed. I think I have all the blocks turned the right way because they're nice, neat, straight rows, but it's always at the end when I'm viewing the video coverage that I notice one if it's out of whack. So let's hope I've got them all in order, and I will sew a row at a time and you can watch the progression. Okay, in your upper right hand corner there's the first 2 rows sewed together. The first row just has the 1 corner piece. The next row has 2 of the triangles and the 1 red block. And by the way, these blocks are 9-inch blocks, if you were wondering. Okay, I will proceed on and you can just watch me. And here is our finished chandelier quilt. It measures 60 by 60, and it was made from 7 fat quarters, or pieces of 7 fat quarters. I didn't use all of them, and 4 yards of background fabric. It needs a good steam iron on my big ironing board, and then it'll be ready to go to the long arm quilters. Well, no, it won't, because I'm going to put a border around it. I'm going to take the leftover fabrics and I'm going to cut them in strips and sew them all together and have a scrappy border that has all of these same colors in it. Then it'll be ready to go to the long arm quilter. This pattern, I'm going to link a free pattern for it that's by Vanessa Gortson. I think that's how you say it. So you will have all the instructions written down if you're one of those people that likes to have everything written down like I do. And I thank her for providing this free pattern. Even though I knew how to make this quilt, it's nice to have somebody else's measurements so you don't have to think too hard. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned something from it. And if you have, would you please like, subscribe, comment, or share? Anything you do helps my channel, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Our next quilt, I'm excited to get started on. It's going to have a coffee theme, and I have some of the most yummy coffee prints ever, that in a bunch of them. So we're just going to mix them all up and come out with a really neat quilt. So I hope you will tune in for that. It'd probably take me 2 to 3 weeks to get that one done. I just work at my own pace, and as soon as I have one done, the video goes up. So once again, thank you for joining me, and I hope you will tune in next time. Remember, whatever you do, do it to the glory of the Lord.